All right, I'm here with Vince McConnell. Now, I believe I met Vince. I don't know how. I think it was on Instagram. I'm barely on Instagram. Don't notifications on, so I check it every few days. And Vince is always posting something, and he's got a lot to say. And we've probably talked, I don't know, maybe at least 3+ hours, at least 2 hours or something off recording if we did anything with doing a interview here. And this, I guess we'll call it's an interview for sure, but more, I may even collaborative ideas because we were always talking back and forth. And I said, I got to get you on, and I'll have Vince introduce himself. I call his breed a lifer, where he's been training as a personal trainer, strength conditioning coach, whatever you want to call it, has his own facility. Let him say that for many years. Saying that with many years, he has an open mind. So I think what I like about Vince is that we kind of hit it off. And of course, I always say this in no disrespect, but anyone who's older than me, I always look up to, and I can try and gather some information from. But what's great about Vince is he's not just sticking, literally before I started this intro, we were just talking about not sticking to just one thing your whole entire life. So he's learning things. He's going to conferences. He learns from the best in the world. He's trained professional athletes. He's taken that and, of course, his own training and then incorporating it to that knowledge that isn't just this one-dimensional approach. So I think the goal today is we're going to talk about how you go about creating this type of, what seems easy, we don't say it's intuitive training, but learning to kind of train without a program. We're getting into why programming is important, and we might even touch on just aging and thinking about efficiency, but also how that relates to high intensity and volume, or just intensity in general. So sorry for that intro, but Vince, why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself to people and let them know, why they should, take you seriously and also listen to you.
Well, seriously, I mean, I'd see you've already done a good job of that, but Mike, I've been in the business since 1983. I've been a personal trainer and strength coach since 83. I've had my own facility starting in 93, and I've had my own facility since then in different locations. And I've been training for 47 years. So a lot of my experience is not just, it's all based in the foundational principles, the science of training, but then also from just the experiential and some anecdotal truths that from training such a wide range of clientele. I mean, everyday people from housewives to professionals to professional athletes, youth athletes. I've got a 97-year-old client, as an example, and then I work with kids right now as young as 8. So from that big, vantage point, you're able to understand how much science is involved in what each and every one of those particular individuals needs to be doing, but then all the different branches of the science.
You also, before we get into more of your stuff here, is that you also have an awesome physique too. So I just want to throw that out there. So I don't know if you want to throw your age out there or not, but you got the hooded sweatshirt on and everything. But as athletic as you are, we'll try and find some clips. We'll throw your Instagram up in there. But you're also walking the walk. It's one thing to be a trainer, and do all these things, but the proof is in the pudding, I like to say, especially when it comes to physical fitness.
I appreciate that. I was born in 65, so I'm going to make everybody do the math, so they can figure that out. But I appreciate that, and that goes both ways. And that was actually one of the things that I first acknowledged about you and all the content you were putting out. Is I'm like, this guy doesn't just have good information on home gym equipment. He obviously follows everything that he's teaching and promoting. So yeah, I'm not saying you have to always look the part, but it definitely, you can't not look the part if it's something that both you understand and you enjoy, because you find ways of making sure that it's a big part of your life on a regular basis. And then also I find that your clients actually have more of an ear to what you're teaching when they know that you're practicing that same thing. So it's not anything I think about, but at the same time, I do understand the necessity to be able to exhibit the things that you teach. Now, I don't do some of the crazy stuff I did 20 years ago, when I have kids ask me, go, how much can you this? How much can you like that? And I go, well, if I wanted to do that, how much could I? I mean, it's a matter of just, understanding where, not limitations, but understanding what you need to be doing at a given time in your training to not only get the result you want, but to stay healthy. And that's something that I think a lot of people ignore for a period of time. And then you get to that point where you realize one bad rep isn't going to make me, but one bad rep could wreck me. So you have to keep that in mind with your exercise selection and what we're talking about the intuitive training part of it.
Yeah, let's cue that up right here, tee it up for everybody, and I'll just give you the floor in this one because we talked about this, I don't know, maybe a month ago, and I was driving somewhere with my kids in the car, and we probably talked for an hour just in this one topic, and I thought it was good. And I think this is a question that comes up a lot. People probably, I don't know exactly how you do your training split or structure, but I've certainly followed programs in the past. If it was a program to the T, it generally was like a strength program. But when it comes to muscle building and things like that, and I'm sure some people are going to nod their heads and some people are going to be screaming at the screen right now, but we touched on this, or I think you even had a professional bodybuilder who talked about this too. So definitely, mention this. But as far as what I've learned and what I've observed from people that have great physiques, I'm just purely talking about, of course, there's function, whatever, but just as far as like keeping muscle, especially at various ages, I never see them walking around with a clipboard or logging stuff. Maybe they loosely have things. They have, of course, a template, but a lot of it, for lack of a better term, I would say is somewhat intuitive. And this goes like the professional bodybuilders. I'm sure they got a plan, but the question, at a certain level, people have asked this question to me, well, how do I do that? How can I train kind of instinctively? How do you know when's enough's enough? And I think you kind of get to that point. It's hard to explain to certain things, but how would you I'll just throw it out there. How would you kind of tackle that question?
You need structure in the beginning in order to not need to depend on it or not be identical. It's just like with nutrition. Unless you've ever tracked your macros, unless you've or tracked your calories, you don't know enough to succeed without it, because there's success in tracking for a season, meaning that just understanding progressive overload, meaning that in training, add weight to the bar. Hey, I can do 10 reps, add weight to the bar. Okay, I can do it, and then continue to do that. But as you progress through your training, there's a point of not only diminishing returns, but there's a point of no return. There's a point where you're just not going to add more weight to the bar. Some will argue and say progressive overload is forever. And I haven't seen that before. I haven't seen that in anybody that I've observed training. I haven't seen it in anybody that I've worked with. I certainly haven't seen it in my own training, where you just inevitably are always adding weight to the bar. I mean, because think about it. If we have a, 200-pound weight stack or up to 300-pound weight stacks, we don't have 800-pound weight stacks, as an example, or, there's a certain limit to what you can do on a barbell. I mean, if you're squatting, 505 for 10, I guess a year from now, you should be, in the 800s. I mean, it's just because it's progressive overload. And if you're training consistently, then you should be. And I know I'm being oversimplistic with this, but the point is that it doesn't mean that doesn't work. Is that there's a point where you can't rely on that anymore. You've got to be more in tune to what your body's telling you. But the only way to get there is to have a period of time, it could be years, it could be a decade, of tracking your training, of being very disciplined in the split that you use to know how your body parts respond, working them with each other. Or if you're a full body advocate, why? Is it because you enjoy training all the body parts together? Some people do, or that you have to because of logistics or time constraints. And those all can work. It's not a matter of me and you saying that doesn't work, you got to do it this way. And there's a whole lot of that we see right now in this industry, where people want to argue about the best split, about frequency, how many times a week, how many sets per week. High reps don't work. You should only do between 4 and 8 reps. Anything over and that's a waste of time, and all that. And the reality is that it all works. It's just it's all got a cost as well. So and
there's a lot of variables too. Like you as a coach would know this, but I see this a lot with pot to my head. I won't say the person or the mo, whatever, but there's sometimes people can look a certain way. And if they're not clear on, well, if you just want to be lean and have muscle, that's a lot easier in my opinion than being, say 200 pounds at a certain lower percent body fat. So putting on actual mass, versus just looking muscular and fit, but like the Fight Club physique. People always look for that. I'm like, that's probably I don't say it's easy, but that's that's more diet and a little bit of conditioning and some resistance training. As far as in my opinion, actual work doing resistance, like I don't think that's very difficult in my opinion.
Agreed. You can do boot camp type workouts. And if you get your nutrition dialed in where you're in a deficit, you're certainly not in a surplus where you're adding weight, you can be lean, and depending on your genetics and your muscle bellies, you can look a lot bigger than you really are. And so the appearance can be very, I don't want to say deceptive in the sense that it's not real. It's just, it's different than what people think it is. Because when you're lean and you've got the type of genetics, your muscles just tend to pop out a little bit more, then you're going to be able to do that with a training program that's really not very scientifically based at all. I mean, it's more about just getting to training to fatigue, training to where you can tolerate, where you can't tolerate anymore. And just as far as your nutrition, doesn't have to be perfect, but your nutrition, again, is keeping you from going into a surplus where you're adding body fat. When I meet with a new client, a prospective new client, the first thing I ask them is, what is your primary objective? Because they can go all over the place if you just say, what do you want to accomplish? But you say, what is your primary objective in a training program? And they have to think about it. Most of them haven't. But then they'll either point to either a picture or point to an image that they have and go, this is what I want. This is what I want, and obviously, you can't look like somebody else. You can use that as it's like with me growing up, Sylvester Stallone was my, that's what I want to look like. And so a lot of my training, ironically, was probably more towards a larger bodybuilder to get to the point, because I'm not a big guy naturally, but in order to get that Stallone look, I had to train a little bit more like an Arnold Schwarzenegger, or like it, knowing I was never going to get that big. But I had that image when I was younger of that's the direction I want to go in. And I made sure my training was geared towards that every time that I went and lifted weights. And so, and I was also into athletics back then and expending a lot of energy outside of the resistance training aspect. And I took that into account. I don't do that at this stage. It's more about my resistance training, and I do some cardiovascular work. But you do have to take that into consideration of what is my primary objective. And obviously everybody wants to be healthy, but most people that are watching your channel, they don't want to just be healthy and doesn't matter what they look like. They want to look good in that process.
You shared a story about a bodybuilder. I forget the one you were talking about. I know he was a legendary bodybuilder, and he was maybe in his years at the time. What was that story about when you asked him about if he had a program, or am I remembering that correctly? It was.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember which one. When we talked about several of them, the Surgeon Gray is
some guy you personally spoke to on the phone, like you were talking to him, and you were talking maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this Don Ross. Don Ross was one that I'm trying to remember because we talked about so many. Don was a longtime writer for multiple magazines: Muscle Mag International, Ironman magazine, Flex magazine, and so forth. And he would watch and observe. He was a bodybuilder himself and also a professional wrestler. And no one was more in tune to professional bodybuilding than Don Ross was, because he was there at Gold's Gym, at World Gym, watching.
That's it. That's the story. Yep.
And he was the one that said, one man's poison, is another man's prize. In other words, it's just there's no one way to train. You can't try to define one single way of training. There's all these multitudes, and a lot of it had to do with their temperament, meaning that their personality was such that some looked like they were rarely ever getting close to failure. I mean, in today's terms, 5 RIR or 5 reps in reserve, something along that line, and they would do, more volume, but just not train to that proximity to failure. And then you had other guys that seemingly every set that they did, and we're not just talking about the high intensity camp like the Mike Mincers of the world, but other guys that did even with the higher volume would seemingly take every set right to the red line, almost over the ledge, every single set that they did. And they both thrived and succeeded on that. And you can throw in, well, it was pharmaceuticals, it was all this and all that, but they were all, take that, say that's a wash. Say they were all doing that. But the point is that their training itself was very individualized, and that he did not see any of them walking around with a clipboard or referring to a journal. Now, I do know that some would record stuff in a journal, say after the workout, just from the standpoint like I do. To this day, I do that, but I don't really refer back to it of what I've got to do tomorrow based on what I did today or what I've got to do the last time I did this body part. With me, it's more of a habit and more just something that kind of substantiates the work itself, but not anything that I go, I've got to write down, because a lot of times I don't even count reps. So when I go to record, I'm going, I don't know if that was, I go, how far did I take it? Proximity to failure. And then if I added another set, which I'll often do, or sometimes may plan on doing 3 sets, or 4 sets and only do 3. I mean, there are things like that, but that's what Don recognized in these bodybuilders, is that they would all have their own thumbprint about the way that they approached every set.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, for sure. I know you know this, but anyone's hearing this, like, there's not, of course, recording stuff, taking note of what you did, I think is, tantamount. It's great information, especially if we're talking about, weights and just setting PRs and just getting stronger. So don't get me wrong, that's valuable stuff. I think what we're talking about is you get in these camps where maybe you follow a program, you buy a program online, you're using an app, you're tracking stuff, and you're so anal, you get to be so mental that you lose, I think, the forest for the trees and really trying to get in tune with your body and, going off what you maybe thought had preconceived ideas of what was possible and just staying so rigid that you just kind of lose. I think you lose sight of just basic training knowledge about what things can and can't do. Because you're probably like this every time you read a study or you hear some sort of a theory, even if you've never heard it before, which you've probably heard everything at this point in time. You're like, you can make sense before you hear the conclusion, like, well, this would probably happen, or this would probably happen. Not that you're no one's Mr. Know-it-all. We're always kind of learners, but you've had enough experience. You're never really surprised by too much. And so when I hear people like they're diehard into this camp and nothing else works, well, then, like, I got a line of, like you said, you have 20 bodybuilders on stage or just in front of you at the local gym. It's not like the high intensity group or high volume group looks so crazy different that you're like, this obviously is objectively better. Like, cause I never see that. And usually, ironically, I noticed and that was the thing with me, is that when I actually grew, for me personally, was when I took the training wheels off and I was following these early bodybuilding magazine programs until I worked out with a friend. I've shared the story before, where I don't want to say he's doing more work. Maybe it was more intensity, more volume. But he was doing more than I was going to do. Like, I thought, okay, this is 3 sets. I'll go on to the next thing. Versus, like, screw it, I'm just going to keep going. This was enough. Starting to just do things that are outside of what was really holding me back. And when I talk to clients, I always feel like that's a thing. Because I'll say, like, just do it. Nothing's going to hurt you. Just try the extra set. Like, well, what if I should? How they start thinking of all these different things and scenarios. I'm like, well, you're missing it. So that's what I'll stop there. But you see where I'm going with that?
Yeah, I mean, the key to that is confidence. And I've often said this, not only to clients, but anytime that I give a talk, is that the number one, if there was one variable that separated good from great, meaning it doesn't mean competitive getting on stage necessarily, but someone with the result that they're getting from their training, I would say it's clarity. Clarity in their training. In other words, they're not perpetually confused. They're not wondering, should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? Is this going to work? Is it not going to work? There's a level of clarity. And then with clarity, you have confidence. And that's different than, I'm not going to listen to what anybody says. I don't care. I know everything. Actually, it's quite the opposite of that. You're willing to listen to anything that is contrary. There could be somebody like, let's just use an example, Mike. Let's say somebody goes, I thrive in the 15 to 20 rep range. I build muscle that way. And I'll give you an example. Doug Brignoli, who's no longer with us, Doug was a mentor of mine in all of his study in the biomechanics, and phenomenal bodybuilder. And Doug, his sequence was up to 30 reps, and he would rarely do anything below 10 to 12 reps. And he knew the science that said that heavier weights and lower reps is, quote, better. Yet he always said, I've never got results from that type of training. Always got better results. And he was not a gigantic bodybuilder. He was definitely genetically gifted, but he was not a guy that you go, well, anything he did would work. He just connected with that higher rep range. Okay, now, if you were to try to give him a reason to doubt that, he would listen to it, but it would not affect the fact that he knew what he was doing was, he had clarity that it was working. And that's the key, is to not have to be in a defensive mode about your training. Because if you have a way of that you say is working for you, but as soon as somebody gives you a study or something to contest it, and then you lose it, you get all defensive and you get into name calling and everything, you don't really believe what you say you believe in. I mean, that applies to every area of life, but we see it in training all the time, where everybody wants to get in these wars of, that doesn't work. Only this works. And the reality is that when you have clarity in what you're doing and confidence, when you go in, that doesn't mean you don't make adjustments. It just means that you're willing to listen to all the stuff out there about stretch-mediated hypertrophy, and then still be able to say, I do better in that shortened position. My body just responds. I've built really good muscle in the shortened range of motion being prioritized. Well, you can't argue with that. I mean, it is what it is, even if science is trying to tell you something other than that. Science, any of the studies that we see, whether they were 10 years ago or 10 minutes ago, they can only give us possibilities and probabilities. They can't 100%. We're not at that point yet with muscle hypertrophy, where you can 100% say this does that. So A plus B equals C. Doesn't matter who you are across the board. That's going to work for every human being that ever touches a weight. If that was true, everybody would just train the same way and get the exact same result. Well, we know that there are genetic differences. And that doesn't just mean in the appearance of the physique. It also means in the way that the physique or the body handles load.
Yeah.
Muscle length, muscle bellies, connective tissue, strength and resiliency. Everybody's a little bit different. So just because that guy can squat, 6 plates doesn't mean that he has to squat 6 plates. It means that he can. And you can take another guy, put 225 on the bar, and he's doing pure clean reps, barbell squat, that he connects with range of motion wise in building his quadriceps in an amazing way. And I'm just using that as an example because most people go, oh, the barbell squat. If I gave them another exercise, they would want to refute and say, well, how about a basic exercise? Well, we'll take the barbell squat and say the same thing. Just because you can go heavy doesn't mean that you have to. It means that you can. And if you've got the strength and the body type to be able to do that, well, then go for it. I'm not going to stop you. I don't know any expert that could stop you if you enjoy doing that. But it doesn't mean that you have to lift that type of load to build muscle.
Yeah, I think we're also, and you hit on this, just that we're also talking preferences here. So even if there was a, say a hypothetical objective best way, which I'm not saying that possibly doesn't exist, but let's say this is the objective best program. I'm using it's easy. It's just the easy one to use. But if you're saying high intensity, it's that, well, it's very easy in the sense that we'll just take a set to failure, and that's anybody can apply that, rinse and repeat. And you can say, well, people don't do it because it's too hard. I'm like, well, that might be true, fine, but we also know you don't have to do that and get the results that other people are getting, say at higher volume, lower intensity, just to make a devil's advocate argument there. But if someone doesn't enjoy those types of workouts, and whether you say, well, that's just, I don't know, you call them a wimp or whatever, something like that. I'm like, doesn't really matter. The point is they might not do it at all. And this gets into, this was kind of maybe a segue into machines too, or just equipment. Cause I'm sure if I didn't already, I'll flash some shots. You give me some footage of your gym, because you're like me, you like trying and experimenting with other things. And I was probably more into that. I still am into that, but I would try all sorts of crazy stuff. I mean, I was back in the day, maybe you were too back in the day with like when they had Paul Check. I go to seminars, everyone's doing everything on a Swiss ball, and I was doing all sorts of wacky stuff, which as much as people make fun of, I think there was some I think there's always a value in something. It gets into, again, efficiency. Is it worth your time? Whatever. But even with modes of exercise on the channel, just covering different things, you find the camps of people are into resistance bands or into barbells. And even today when I posted a video, someone was fighting back and forth, or said they liked bands, someone said they're garbage and just got to do free weights. And I think, again, we get into the context of like, why are they using this tool? What is the end result? And also, if there's something as simple as like just grabbing a pair of resistance bands, and if you just want to work your arms, build your shoulders, say for like a wedding or something like that, bands would be probably the path least resistance instead of going to the gym, whatever. But what's your stance now just on machines? How do you use the machines versus just sticking to the basics? And just kind of the whole argument, is there a superiority, or just is one trump another with something?
Great question. And the thing is that to say I've come full circle is probably an understatement, because I don't think the circle ever really ends, from learning. In the beginning, when Nautilus machines first came out, that was the end thing. And I actually trained in a gym before I had my own gym that was based off of a Nautilus circuit, as well as free weights, dumbbells, barbells that would complement the Nautilus machines. And so I went from that aspect to being more involved in sports and athletic preparation, where I said machines are the devil. Stay away from machines. They don't provide, like you were talking about Paul Check, they don't provide the instability that we need to train in that environment. So I got rid of my first facility, got rid of every imaginable machine. I mean, you wouldn't find a machine in my facility, all free weights, everything that was unstable training. I mean, it was so much to the extreme, because that's what, at that moment, that was where my clarity was. In other words, that's what I believed. I believed that was the key to not only athletic performance, but training particular muscles, was to create as much instability as you can. Then you begin to get more back into some machines are effective. You can't completely do away with without a leg extension and a leg curl. So I started implementing machines kind of piece by piece back in, begrudgingly almost like an apology of like, well, I've got to bring that one in, I got to bring that one in. But hey, I'm not a machine guy. Okay. I'm just bringing those in just to complement all the instability stuff. So again, you go from Nautilus and then bringing some other stuff in to complement the Nautilus to now going flip side. And then where I am now is, when I say full circle, is that I understand the value of all of that, meaning that there's certain exercises, stability is a necessity. It's not just something that you're better off if you have. You need stability in order to produce force to load that muscle with enough resistance. And so from that vantage point, I see where I look at machines in the sense of, is it giving me something that free weights are not giving me? Meaning that, easier, like the quantum trainer that we're familiar with. I was having trouble with clients getting dumbbells in position once they got up to, say, the 80s or the 90s. And I'm talking about the older generation. And they're like, I can't do this anymore, because I'm just, every time I lay back with the dumbbells to get them to mount them, it's a risk. And I would see that, and whether it's their lower back or shoulders, wrists. And I saw that even before they acknowledged it, but they still wanted to do it until they finally realized this is not a smart decision. It's not a good business decision for me to put my body in that, try to get in that alignment with these heavy dumbbells. So you can either go, well, I'll go lighter and higher reps, and then that has its inefficiency built into it. With the quantum trainer, the leverage machine, that allows us to be able to do one of the better low incline presses I've ever done on any type of a machine, commercial or otherwise, and to be able to load that pattern in a way that there's no limit other than the person's strength. In other words, getting in position is no longer a problem. So we're able to, once again, be productive. That's an example where a machine is superior to the free weights. And so it depends on the machine more than it is. I think machines are better. I think there are times that they can be, but and it's like the belt squat that you and I each have. We like that. There's value in that. There's some drawbacks with everything, but you have to always look at it and go, okay, if I had 2 lines or 2 columns of boxes and I was checking them, which one is the clear winner? In other words, from the pros and the cons. And there usually will be. If there's not, then it's more personal preference. Which do you enjoy? But if I do have those columns and there's a predominant pro to a con, then I'm going to go in that direction with that particular either body part or movement pattern.
Yeah, maybe I'm thinking for the person listening to this, maybe keeping it practical too, about we can go to the home gym, or even if you're going to the gym, what are some machines versus key exercises you think are just some, rattling off some of those staples? And I also maybe touch on this too, because I found as I've gotten older, when you said kind of going full circle, I think of that Bruce Lee quote where he says when he first started, a punch was a punch, kick was a kick, and then it became something else, and then it became back to like it's just a punch and a kick type of thing. Or when I first started, it was bodybuilding. And I don't always say I'm a bodybuilder, but basically, long and short of it is I did the whole gamut of crazy functional, quote unquote, exercises. And I had jogged my memory of this. Someone left a comment recently about, well, what about functional stuff? And how basically he was saying it sounded like, well, bodybuilding isn't functional. And my point was, I think it's the most efficient way to put on lean body tissue very easily. And there's all sorts, obviously, benefits to that. And I have found that when I've ditched some of the functional training stuff that I used to do, and just for the sake of time and getting older, I don't think I've really, now there's things I think I should do more of that I don't do. But my point is, I think there's a lot of value in just building just basic old school bodybuilding techniques, for lack of a better term. But how would you mix that, I guess, for someone who's looking at, I want to build a home gym, going to the gym, I really want to put on lean body tissue. What are those machines and what kind of approach do you kind of look at nowadays, either for yourself personally with clients?
Yeah, it depends on the space they have, obviously, in the budget. What I typically, if somebody said, I've got half of a garage, like I do here at home, and budget, obviously, I don't want to spend more than I have to, but at the same time, I prioritize my training. I think a functional trainer or a dual weight stack column is one of the first pieces that I recommend for anybody, because you can train the entire body with that and do it in a way that doesn't require years of learning technique. Meaning that, someone that, maybe doesn't have a trainer available, somebody that is training literally on their own, they can train their entire body in a very productive way with a cable system. And then again, I give credit back to Doug Brignoli when he came out with his system of training called the Brig 20, which he defined as the top 20 exercises, most efficient exercise. Let me say that, not best, but most efficient exercises for each body part. The majority of them were done on a functional or a dual weight stack machine. And that opened my eyes to the efficiency of that. From there, I'd add dumbbells. I do think that there's value in having adjustable dumbbells. I've always used power block dumbbells. I know you've got some different companies that you work with that look very interesting, as far as that goes. An adjustable bench. And then depending on from there, it's difficult to train your legs in a sustainable way without some machines, I've found. And I mean, you can, if you've got a squat rack and you're a good squatter and you know how to squat and you can squat without getting hurt, then maybe the squat is okay for you, and that's fine. And I'm perfectly okay with somebody telling me that's the best exercise, because if they believe it, then I'm not going to argue with them. It's just that for the majority that I have observed of individuals, the barbell squat is not the preferred exercise. Not that it can't be, it's just that it's not, because of the factors that are involved with technique, the setup in general, and then also, the progressive overload. They think forever to get better at the squat, I have to just keep adding weights, keep adding plates. And that does have a diminishing return. And if your ego is still healthy and strong, you don't know where that is until it's too late. So that's, again, not me condemning the barbell, is simply saying that the majority of people, as per what should they get machine-wise, I think something for the legs. The Frank Zane Leg Blaster is a great squat machine. It's no longer in production. That was a great machine for the home, for the squats. The Squat Max MD, that's the belt squat that you and I both have. I think that is definitely a good, if somebody said, I just have room for one squat piece, I think that would be good. A seated leg curl, leg extension, plate loaded would be something that I think is definitely worth adding, because it's very difficult to train the hamstrings, certainly in the knee flexion aspect without a machine. I mean, you can do supine leg curls where you're laying on the floor with a roller or something like that, but it's just not the same. And then you're not really progressing that either, because it's body weight. And then, the leverage machine aspect, for pressing movements, overhead press and bench press, I think those are very good. But I think you can train your back for sure with the dual weight stack and need nothing else as far as your lats, your mid traps, your upper traps, in general, your entire back. You can train with a dual weight stack, and I do with the majority of my clients.
Yeah, I like that. I think I probably mentioned this before on the channel, but I think so much of the just staying on the home gym community, but I think it permeated to the gym setting too, and I don't think people really think about it. You probably definitely saw this, and I saw it when I was younger age, but when CrossFit first came around, my point is I think CrossFit really created this mold of what people think of when they think of home fitness nowadays with resistance training, and also the modern gym. Because before CrossFit, you saw a lot more machines, and I'm not saying it's good or bad, but then after CrossFit, it was just squat racks. Everything's a squat rack. And what made me think about this is your point about saying, like with the barbell, I love doing barbell squats, probably my favorite leg exercise, because there's so many things you can do with it. However, and I always tell people too, I avoided squats with the plague when I was younger, because I just, like everyone, you're embarrassed because you can't do it properly, and kind of hurts your knees. You're just I'm not going to learn it yet. But once I finally learned it and dialed it down, a few different techniques, the ways I would do it, favorite exercise hands down. But I think most people don't have a place doing it. And I don't say that with the pace of superiority. It's just, if you take someone who's middle-aged and never learned this stuff, they don't have the time, the efficiency standpoint, I find a lot of people just buy the cookie cutter mold of squat racks, barbells, dumbbells. And I think a lot of that really, when I first watched home gym reviews, which I still hate saying that's what I kind of do, but because I had no interest in watching them, but when I'd watch, I'm like, well, this seems like a CrossFit channel. It's like someone who's into CrossFit, and not knocking them in any way. I said this, I think maybe to him, but like the Coop Garage Gym reviews, when I first saw that, it seemed like every garage gym review, or even I went on a forum, it was like, okay, it's a barbell and squat rack. And I get that's a meat and potatoes, no question. But when I talk to clients, and I've met enough clients, I'm sure you have, and this goes even for someone who's younger, 20 or 30s, if you're not trained in how to do it properly, that machine is just as worthless as the Bowflex you'd make fun of. And 9 times out of 10, I would say, is when I was defining the total gym, I was like, probably more people would benefit out of a total gym. And I would say this with a huge caveat, people would go over their heads, is that if you don't know how to use a squat rack, you're not going to use it, you're not going to use it properly, a total gym would probably be a much better option. Or you can make fun of whatever it is, the Bowflex in your grandma's basement. That would probably be better for you and get more results than doing something improperly or less efficient. So I don't know where I was going with that. I was asking what you thought about just the influence of so you can touch on that, but just the influence of, squat racks, or this evolution we're kind of seeing. Because my point was to go back to it was, now you're seeing machines are now popular and accepted. And I think that's the new trend in the home gyms. You're seeing more people that are covering garage gym review stuff, covering machines like lever arms and crazy attachments that I think if you had said this 20 years ago, people would have made fun of you, like, well, that's worthless. That's, not functional. It's a machine. You're just buying this big apparatus for nothing. So there's some thoughts I had.
Yeah. The CrossFit Influence, trying to think when it started, in the early 2000s.
Yeah, that's what I would say. Yeah. Not that it was bad again. I'm not devaluing it at all, but yeah.
I'm not a proponent of it. I've trained guys that are very good CrossFit coaches, so I do have respect for it. I do know some good CrossFit coaches. It's a competition. That's really where I see it now. It's kind of like Olympic lifting. It's like, do you need to be a good Olympic lifter to be a good athlete? There's some that would want to argue all day long that you do, that you need to be good in the Olympic lifts if you want to realize your athletic. I'm not one of those. I've seen the pardon the, you know, the train wrecks of bad Olympic lifts. I've seen that of where you go, that was not necessary. And then I've also seen athletes that could be Olympic lift competitors, that their technique is so just almost perfect. Looks like a piece of art in motion because they're so good at it. And I go, that's great. You know, I love it. It definitely is helping them from an athletic standpoint and triple extension. Can we get triple extension? And I'm not going to get in that whole rabbit hole, but can we get it in another way? Yes, we can. Can we get it in another way that's just as effective, maybe even more effective? Yes. So with CrossFit comes in, and then it teaches people how to be compliant with their workouts, that the workouts are not long, and also to be, when I say competitive, how to sink their teeth into workouts. Because there's some people that if they don't have immediate goals, they won't go work out. They're not going to, I mean, you know, there's some people that wouldn't take the trash out unless they could film themselves doing, you know, spins and, you know, somersaults while they're taking the trash out. I'm talking, and again, silly example, but I'm just saying that even the most mundane things people don't want to do, and work training or working out would fit into that with some people. I've got to do it and I don't want to.
Or it has to be hard. You know, it has to be intense. I'm thinking like Orange Theory. Otherwise, it's not effective.
Correct. They have to take themselves to a point where they feel like they have, you know, faced their Goliath for that day and made it through. And that's something that if you take that out of it, maybe like with guys like you and me, I mean, I love training, and it's something that, and I saw a video the other day of Arnold Schwarzenegger saying, motivation, I'm not good at motivation. I'm not a disciplined person. He goes, I'm addicted to training. He goes, you know, if I miss a day, something's missing in my life, you know, and that's him saying that now, and you could see how that benefited him obviously throughout his career. So if you don't have that pull to your garage gym or to your gym, your commercial gym you go to, then you do need to have something that you just identify with, something that you can track. There goes, you know, that thing again about tracking things. It's like most people wouldn't get out of a chair unless they know I got to do my 10,000 steps today, you know. And so with that, there's something to it. But I also am not an advocate of becoming, you know, a hamster on a wheel either. I don't think that we should live our life where we're always looking at our Apple Watch and our Garmin and going, you know, trying to figure out if we succeeded for the day or not. I think that there's some dysfunction in that part of it. I know you asked me about a squat rack, and now I'm talking about Apple Watches.
That's good.
But the thing is about that, I do see where we've progressed past that with the machines, where people are beginning to realize I can train in a more sustainable way without relying on a barbell. And that's typically when I'm talking to someone about a home gym, is I ask them what their primary. Now, if somebody said, I love bench press, I love squat, I love deadlifting from the ground, then I'm going to direct them to purchase the best barbell that they can, and then get the best rack that they can afford, because that's going to be their bread and butter. That they're going to love doing that. That's who they are. They know it. They want to do it until they can't, or if they choose not to do it anymore. So I'll direct them that way. But that is a very small percentage of individuals in general, at least in my experience. So from there, we look at it from an efficiency and a sustainability standpoint, and go, let's buy for efficiency. Let's not buy for proficiency, but for efficiency. And that means, you know, from the standpoint of, can I learn this in the shortest time possible. I don't want to say learn it in a day, because anything takes longer than a day, but can I learn how to use the machine? Can I progress with this? Meaning, I'm not just doing a set with X amount of resistance and there's nowhere to progress with. Not to chase the progress, but at least be able to progress when you go, this is too easy. Somebody a set of 10 and they go, hey, I could probably do 20 reps. Like, it's time to go up in resistance. So you want to be able to add load when it's called for. Mm-hmm. And then, so then machines are invaluable for that. But then you go space wise, you can't just buy single station machines for each exercise unless you've got, 3,000 square feet, to your luxury to be able to just do that. You have to get multi-purpose machines. And so with that, you keep in mind, okay, what, my body size, because a 6'4" guy is going to be a little bit different than, say, somebody 5'10", or is your wife going to be working on the machine as well? Those things have to factor into the machine that you invest in. But I totally agree with you that you can whether it's it really across the board, it could be a Bowflex. I mean, it just doesn't matter as long as you know how to use the machine and execute the exercises in a way that's loading the targeted muscle. You can get tremendous workouts with machines.
Yeah, I think that's another area I've come full circle with too. I went to a gym, I don't know how long ago it was, but I was out of town and I was filming stuff for something else. I never did use the footage for it, but I stayed after and did a workout in the gym and I just couldn't get over how I preferred my home gym and all the extra machines. If I was a kid or even before I committed to the home gym, I thought, this would really affect me, my physique wise, a certain way. When really the nuts and bolts basic parts I was using, or the basic, I should say, exercises and just principles we were talking about at the very, very beginning of this interview about, for again, lack of a better term, training intuitively, just listening to my body. If I feel that this, again, I use a total gym because that was always the easiest example. People thought it was crazy when I was using it, but still use it. That lateral raise in the total gym, if it felt subpar or subadequate, I would be discarding it. And I've always said the legs are a weak spot in that machine. But everything else, upper body, feels just as good as a comparable, more or less, I would say, to even a cable stack machine. Of course, the resistance is going to feel a little different, but I knew in my head, like, it's not going to affect me one way or the other. My body's not going to have this drastic difference. I didn't feel like I was missing out on something, really. And we can hit on that, but one last thing, 'cause I know we're getting over here, is or topic area. Feel free to hit on that stuff you want to, but I ask this probably to every person I have on. I don't know why, I probably shouldn't, but I think it's an interesting topic because I think it comes up with the one-on-one clients. Is just this idea, and I don't even know where you stand on this, Vince. I guess I don't have any emotional tie one way or the other, how everyone's feelings are. I ask you this only because you're in awesome shape and you're I'm going to say, lack of a better term, older than me, but amazing physique. I mean, you got the physique of a 20-year-old, no question. If everyone watched you, so you found the fountain of youth, no question. But what's your thoughts on? Because I'm sure you get this question, you run into it a little bit, but the idea of just getting older and feeling that, well, I need to be enhanced, special substances, TRT, HRT, in order to kind of still feel like, perform like I was when I was, which obviously it's not going to happen. We're on a decline. But what's your thoughts on that, or that allure and that pull to it?
Both my personal as well as an educated response is that I'm not an advocate of it unless it's something that is, when I say obviously an issue for someone, because again, I cannot get in everybody's skin and say, never do this, never do that, never do that. But at the same time, I would see that as a last resort, because it's something that I believe you touched on in one of your more recent videos. It's not something you get on, you give it a trial for a while, you get off of it, and then you go your merry way. It's something that you ultimately have to commit to being part of your life here forward. And I do understand the side effects of it, probably more than most people do. There's some that I've had this discussion with, and they're not willing to see that part. They only see the positive aspect of it, because what it's giving them at that moment makes them feel like they are tapping into that fountain of youth. And I'm one that believes there are things that you can do in your, not only your lifestyle, but your nutrition, that are not the same. I'm not saying that food is like a pharmaceutical, and thank God it's not, because it would have all kinds of detrimental effects. There are things that God has given us to be able to apply in our life, and that includes paying attention to all those signals that we get on a daily basis, as far as stress, as far as just, you know, making good decisions about what you should and shouldn't do with your time and your energy. Those all factor into it. So I would not condemn someone for going in that direction. I would encourage them to become more educated with more than just one source of information in that topic, and go as deep into those as they can to make a very, it's just like with when I get asked about Ozempic, it's not the same conversation. It's similar because a lot of it is an emotional conversation with the people that I have it with, because they feel like they've been convinced that they need it, that they're, you know, in a state of inferiority. So, you know, they're almost like they've made their mind up and they want me to agree with them on it, as opposed to coming to me for just some input. And again, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not pretending to be one. And, you know, have respect. There are some really good ones, but there are some that have other priorities with the decisions that they make when it comes down to what they advise people to, you know, to, from a pharmaceutical standpoint. So those would be, and then I'm going to tick some people off by saying that. And like I said, I focus more on the good ones that I know, and they're the ones that give you the full picture when you communicate with them, as opposed to, oh, what did you bring up TRT? Oh, 100%. I mean, it's the bomb. It's the best thing everybody when they're 35, they need to be on it. They need to, and that's literally how they start to approach that topic when you bring it up. So those are the ones that I'm more, I don't want to just say shy of. I mean, I would run from those types of people. I would take in all the information that you can, and then, you know, and get as much seemingly conflicted information as you can too. Don't just trust one source, or don't just trust a friend's source. You know, you may have a best buddy. He goes, "Hey man, this guy is great. I'm going to send you to him." You know, and you go, "Okay, well, I mean, don't just depend on that one source, even if it's your best friend sending you there."
This is maybe the last question, and I'm putting a lot on you in this one here, but you can go as long as you want. But it might be good to see if you can, you know, bust this out in bullet point fashion here. If you were just going to lay out, this is a selfish question, but I think everyone will love this one, is just what are some of your you could say lessons in the last maybe 20 years, 10 years, but where you're at right now in this stage of life, because obviously you're still performing, you're doing awesome good, you're working hard, you're obviously training, all the experience you learn. How would you encapsulate, of course, there's individual, you know, context here, but how would you encapsulate just some best practices, even that last point with TRT staying natural, or just, you know, just feeling good as you age? What are some overall dietary, training, lifestyle stuff that really just makes, in a big overarching way, makes you just feel kind of just top of your game, top performance?
I'm going to follow up with that last topic. I didn't say this. You do not need to be on TRT or hormone replacement therapy to be lean and be fit and be muscular at whatever age you are. So I'll leave it at that. Answer to your question, the most important thing that I've learned in the last 20 years is that you are as good as your next training session, not this one, because it's a perpetual process. It's something that you don't pay it forward in the sense where you go, yeah, I'm gonna just crush myself for 12 weeks or for 6 weeks, and then I'm just going to lay back. I mean, there's things, you know, periodization and all that. That's a different topic. But I'm talking in terms of somebody thinking they can fully commit to something and train 5 days a week, do 2-hour workouts, do cardio in the morning, cardio in the evening, and then I've done it. I got there. Now I can. It's kind of like they would train for a marathon or something. Now I'm just gonna sit back and coast. It doesn't work like that. You've got to approach every workout like this one is going to affect my next workout, and then it's a perpetual process from there. So make your decisions about what you do in your workouts based off of both the psychological and the physical factors that are involved of, can I sustain this? And then go from there, as opposed to thinking I can tolerate it for a little while. Get that word out of your vocabulary. It should never be about tolerating anything. You're not trying to prove yourself in your workouts. As well, Mike, goes back to the clarity part that I mentioned earlier about having clarity in your workouts. There should not be anxiety in your workouts. Your workouts should not be a source of anxiety to your daily life, meaning I got to fit it in here. If I don't fit it in here, if I don't get my hour in and I only get 30 minutes in today, I'm a failure. They won't verbalize it that way, but they'll feel that way, that there's something that they did not perform well enough that day. It's, again, a 20-minute workout is better than one that you don't do. A workout where you just select 3 exercises and say, I'm going to do a couple of sets of each of those, and then I'm going to show up tomorrow. That's going to be, or your next workout, that's always going to be most productive. And when you do that, you just trust that you're going to come back more recovered. You're going to come back more psychologically infused than if you skipped it altogether, because it's hard to kickstart the workouts back after you've just not done them, after you've just been. I mean, there are times that life gets in the way of your workouts, yes, but you know the difference in that and you choosing to not do it because you just don't feel like it.
Mm. Yep. Awesome. Anything else? Just follow up with that bullet point. Diet, any other lifestyle factor stuff you think is major, you think is worth adding in there?
Diet is, again, an individual process more than it is any one particular way of eating. It's something that you have to take into account the psychological satiety part of it, meaning that if you are in a perpetual mode of being unsatisfied, feeling deprived, that's like holding an inflated basketball underwater. So you want to find a way to eat the things that you want to eat with the focus on the things that your body needs. And I find that when you focus on what your body needs and not on what to avoid, the stuff that you need to avoid, or the stuff that you not only need to, but want to avoid, tend to push themselves away by focusing more on what do I need to eat, what is beneficial for me to eat, and then fill your pantry, your refrigerator, freezer up with those things instead of thinking that I can just use willpower to not eat the things I don't need to. And then give yourself the freedom to, when you're out at dinner, you want to order dessert. You'll find that fewer and fewer of those, I'm going to allow myself to do it. Do you want to do it? Because you've learned that it's not something that is taboo. It's not something that you should have to always be pushing away, because when you're always thinking about what not to do when it comes to nutrition, that attracts it. I know that's kind of a very deep answer to your question, because there's no one way of getting all your protein and your carbs and your essential fats in. There's got to be a way that you can connect with, and then uniform eating. That's something that I learned from Clarence Bass, who was my first mentor in this business back in 1980. Everybody may remember, I say everybody, there are those that may remember Clarence when he wrote the books the Ripped series, and he wrote for Muscle and Fitness magazine, had a column. That's where I first found out about him back in like 78, 79. And he was an advocate of uniform eating. He said, because then when you do want to make a tweak one way or the other, you can remove a half a tablespoon of peanut butter where you used to have a tablespoon and a half. You can remove a tablespoon of that. You can not add that to that. I mean, there are things that are very minor subtractions when you want to get leaner, as opposed to you having to go on some special, diet where you're cutting. I'm removing 10 things from my diet now. You don't do that. You just make minor adjustments, and then psychologically you don't feel deprived. You're in control. You're making proactive decisions for your nutrition that benefits you. So get your protein in first. I tell every client that. Then carbs, get them as natural and complex as possible. If you're one that has a sweet tooth, add something sweet to your diet regularly in a small amount. That's better than trying to save up and go, I'm just going to eat the whole cake. It's better to have small bits. And again, not filling your pantry up with it. Just have something that you go, that's my number one go-to. For me, it's chocolate chip cookies, as an example. And so I make sure I've got some type of chocolate every single day. And that's how it sounds, again, kind of like, oh, you can't do that. Yeah, you can. You can, and I've been doing it for 30 years. So that, and then hydrate. Hydrate, make sure that you're getting enough clean water in your nutrition plan. And I know that seems almost kind of like, too simplistic, but there are a lot of people that do not do that on a very regular basis. And then it throws your system off, for cravings that you otherwise wouldn't have.
Awesome. I think that was awesome information, Vince. A lot of stuff I was bookmarking. Specifically, I can eat junk food all day, so I just gotta not buy that stuff. That's my problem.
Well, get one that you like and keep it. That's what I do. I mean, I get one particular, what is my one that it's number one. And then you go with that, you keep that on hand, and then you eat a small amount of that where you never feel deprived.
Yeah, my problem, I got like 8 things though. I love Cheetos, I love chocolate.
Get it down to 2.
Yeah, there we go. I like that. That's good. I'll take 2. All right, Vince. Well, I don't think we said in the beginning, you might have mentioned it, but where's your facility at? And you can share everything from your Instagram, wherever else, whatever other social media stuff you got.
I'm in Fairhope, Alabama, and I do take online clients. And the best way to communicate with me is just through email, mcconnellathletics@gmail.com. And then I'm on Instagram, Facebook. I've got some a good quantity or library of videos up on YouTube, and I'm getting ready to do an entire library of exercise videos that for all of my online clients they'll have access to, that will cover every imaginable exercise, resistance bands, just about every tool that somebody could have in their home, as well in a commercial gym. So that's coming up soon. And what did I say? I said Instagram, and I do a little bit of X, that used to be Twitter, but not much. So predominantly the Instagram is where I put the majority of my content.
Okay. Awesome, Vince. Always great talking to you. I'll put everything, all the links down below. Maybe we can do this again sometime. My problem with you is that we could go on all sorts of topics, which is always good. I always have a good time talking to you.
All right. I appreciate it, Mike, always.
All right. Thanks, Vince.
Okay, brother.